because our topic is conflict resolution, how we solve problems. And just to introduce, there's three types of conflicts that people have. There's one kind of conflict which is interpersonal between people. Me and my mother are not getting along, me and my friend are not getting along. Then there's intrapersonal. When I have a conflict inside myself, should I do this or should I do that? Should I spend my time this way? Should I spend my time that way? Is this good for me? Is this bad for me? And this is our decision-making things. So that's called an intrapersonal conflict. It's as if there are two people fighting, but the two people are both inside my head. Okay? And then there's a third kind of conflict. And the third conflict is between me and reality. There's something going on in my life that I'm fighting with. I don't want to accept the situation. And on some level, we're going to get to that, but that is really an issue of bitachon. Because it's almost like I'm in conflict with Hashem. Hashem is telling me something, and I'm saying, no, I don't want to accept what you're telling me. So these are the three kind of conflicts that exist. And if you can think of it that way, the conflict resolution covers benadam le'avero, me arguing with somebody else, benadam le'atzmo, how I deal with my own issues, problems, and benadam le'makom, me and Hashem. So we're going to deal with all three of them, not necessarily all today, but we're going to start with a very interesting theory. There's a theory that says that the way you resolve conflict between you and people is also going to be the way you're going to resolve a conflict between you and yourself and you and Hashem. Now, I have to tell you this, honestly, I don't agree with this theory. So you can watch it in your own life and see if you agree or not. There's a world-famous conflict resolution expert. Her name is Susan Heitler, and she wrote a few books, one of them called From Conflict to Resolution. And she happens to be Jewish, and I heard her speak in Yerushalayim a few times. And she writes that she has found that a lot of people will use the same method. I have been asking a lot of people, I'm nowhere near as an expert as she is, but for my own personal life, I have not found this to be true, and some people I've spoken to. So you can watch yourself and see if it's true. The first thing that we have to say is that there's 5 ways to resolve a conflict. Only one of them is good. So what are the first 4? I'm going to talk about the bad ones and then the good one at the end. One method is called the aggressive. First I'll give you the list, and then we'll explain them, okay? An aggressive method of conflict resolution is number 1. A passive method of conflict resolution is 2. A frozen method of conflict resolution is 3. And a running away method of conflict resolution is 4. We're going to get to explain all of them. What's the healthy method of conflict resolution? The one that we all want to use is called win-win. And we're going to explain this soon. Okay, so let's deal with what aggressive means. What does it mean, an aggressive form of conflict resolution? Have you ever been in a conflict with a friend where you wanted to go to one place and she wanted to go somewhere else, and she said, we're doing it my way, that's it. If you want me to go with you, we have to go there. Conflict over in around 20 seconds. Why? She won. That's called an aggressive method of conflict resolution. And some people, especially when we think of people who are abusive, controlling, this is the way they solve all conflicts. There are very few conflicts in their life because their answer always is my way or the highway, and they get their way. That's called an aggressive method. Now, according to Susan Heitler, these same people, when they have a conflict in their head, they will also be aggressive with themselves. And we're going to have to look at what that looks like. It's very interesting in a minute. I want to say one other important point about this. Every method is sometimes appropriate. The problem is when it's your consistent method that you use all the time. When would an aggressive method of conflict resolution be appropriate? I'll give you an example. If I have a little child, a 2-year-old, running into the street and a bus is coming, I'm not going to say, come sweetie, let's talk about this. I'm going to say, I'm going to shove him out of the street, I'm going to grab him, yank him by his hand, and put him on the sidewalk. I just resolved the conflict. He wanted to be in the street. I wanted him out of the street, but I got my way. Why? Because it was life-threatening. So sometimes we use aggressive methods to resolve a conflict when there's some kind of very, very life-threatening thing going on. Okay? So everything has its place, and there's even a place for being aggressive. So we're going to go through what it looks like in our head. But first I want to go through the list in terms of intrapersonal, and then we'll go into what it looks like intrapersonal. Passive. What's a passive method of conflict resolution? Okay, we'll do it your way. It's okay. It's okay. Hands up. You might think that a passive person is always responding to an aggressive person. Meaning somebody's saying, we're only going here. And then I say, okay, this is not true. Because people who use passivity to resolve conflict are often being passive even when nobody's challenging them. Were you ever in a conversation with somebody who says, I was thinking that this is what we should do tonight, but I know it's probably stupid, and forget it. I don't even know what I'm talking about. Forget it. They're being passive, and nobody's even attacking them, and they're already being passive. And these are people who often don't have so much confidence to assert themselves. So they're always saying, okay, we'll do it your way. Now this gets confusing in Torah Hashkafa. Why? Because there's a concept called vitor. And vitor means to give in and to let somebody have the way. And sometimes that's a beautiful thing to do. In fact, in marriage, one of the things that causes a glue in a relationship is my ability to say, I'm happy to do it your way sometimes. What's the difference between a passive mode of conflict resolution and vitor? And this is a very important point, girls. If you have to give in because you have no choice, because you don't even know how to assert yourself, that's not a good mode. That's not being a tzaddikus. Being a tzaddikus is saying, I could assert myself, I have asserted myself, and I'm choosing here not to assert myself because I care about you and I want to make you happy. But anybody who always is being passive is not coming from a place of love towards the other person. They're coming from their own inability to assert themselves. And that is not considered healthy. And these people have no conflicts in life. You know why? Because they're always giving in. So, nothing to fight about. But I need to be in a place where I can assert myself. And occasionally, maybe even often, I'm choosing not to from a point of confidence, not from a point of, okay. In marriage therapy, often when a couple comes in, they ask the couple how much they fight, how much argue. Now, there's a certain kind of a curve. If there's a lot of fighting, it's often a sign that the marriage is in trouble. But if the couple says that they've never once had a conflict, they're probably also in trouble. Because you can't live with somebody for 100 years and never disagree about anything. So the marriage therapists say that when the couple says, no, we never have any disagreements, usually some person is scared. They're passive, they're not confident, or maybe they're scared of the other person. But always giving in is not a healthy sign either. So we want a low level of conflict because the couple gets along well, but to say that they've never, ever argued about something, never had a disagreement, we wonder who here is too passive. Okay? So we're not aiming for zero conflict, we're aiming for a low level conflict. Okay. So that's passive. So passive sometimes will be good, especially when it's coming from a place of love. I really wanted to go to my parents for Pesach, but I know it's so important to you to go to yours, we'll go to yours. Sometimes that's beautiful. But somebody who's always passive and always putting his hands up, that's not a good form of conflict resolution either. Let's get to number 3. 3 is freeze. What is freeze? This is what they call, the more sophisticated word for it is immobilized. Immobilized means that these people, when they get to conflict with other people, they just freeze. They cannot resolve the conflict. So it's not like they are in a good position. It's just, here you are, you having an argument with somebody, and you're arguing about something, and all of a sudden you look and you're like, oh, gotta go to class, and you leave. And for a few days, it's kind of calm in your room between you and your roommate, and then it blows up again, and it's like, oh, late, gotta go. And the conflict never gets resolved. It comes up, and people kind of don't know how to get to a conclusion, so it kind of dies down, but it's always simmering under the surface. And some people, this is the way they resolve conflict. They keep on kind of not solving it. Or another way of a freeze would be when you're arguing with somebody about something and you suddenly change the topic. You're trying to you can't get to the bottom of this issue. And it's funny because sometimes people tell me that they have ongoing conflicts as people were married. They have a certain thing that they and their husband disagree about, and they've been arguing about the same thing for 10 years, and they haven't ever had a resolution, because it's always time to go to Meyer when, somewhere in the middle of the conflict, somebody has to run to Meyer or something like that. That's freeze. Flee is number 4. What's flee? Flee is, and this is a very interesting one, because we don't usually think of it this way. Flee is when a person, because of the conflict that they have, and again, right now we're talking interpersonally with somebody else. I have a fight, I'm fighting with somebody, or there's somebody I'm not getting along with, or there's somebody who I have tension with, And it's bothering me so much that I just go to some kind of obsessive or addictive behavior to kind of get away from the problem. And these are people who suddenly find themselves drinking or smoking or overeating or over-exercising or workaholism. They run into their work, but they do something to get away from their conflicts. And very often you see in marriage, when people have a conflicted marriage, there's often at least one party who gets very involved in something addictive if they're this kind of a person, because that's how they deal with their conflict. So they'll walk into therapy talking about their addiction, but a good therapist will say, what conflict is unresolved in their life that led to the addictive behavior? And this is very common. And there's all kinds of addictive behaviors, and there's all kinds of obsessing and things like that. But this is suddenly somebody who's doing something very obsessively because of an unresolved conflict. Okay, that's the four ways. So we have aggressive, passive, immobilized, and addictive, if you want to call it that way. Okay. Now, what does this look like intrapersonally? What does this look like inside me? So first, let's explain a little what intrapersonal conflict means. My friend wants me to go with her for Shabbos. I really, really want to go to my cousin's by myself and not take anybody with me. So I have something going on in my head. Should I be nice to her, who needs me? Or should I do what I want for myself, which is really to have a Shabbos alone? Even something like, should I break up with this boy or should I marry him? That's called an intrapersonal conflict. I don't know what to do. Intrapersonal conflicts are often two voices inside me that are talking, and they're fighting with each other. Now, we just said that people often use the same method that they use in interpersonal and intrapersonal. What would an aggressive method of conflict resolution be? So let me give you an example. Let's talk about the roommate situation, a friend situation. The friend really wants, she has no place to go for Shabbos. She wants to come with you to wherever you're going. That's one side of the conflict. The other side is telling you, you really want a time alone with your cousins. You didn't want to take anybody with you this time. You just needed a break. And you've been spending too much time with that friend, and you really just need a break. So an aggressive mode would be when one side of the conflict is suddenly yelling inside your head and saying, what are you talking about? You're a good Jewish girl. You have to do mitzvos. You have to take her. How could you leave her alone? Okay, you can come. Now, you might have been choosing a nice choice, but you've done it in such an aggressive way. Meaning, you didn't even listen to the other side. When we talk about win-win, we'll see what healthy win-win is. But aggressive is when you decide you solve your conflicts by one voice yelling at you and telling you what to do. People often tell me that when they have an aggressive voice in their head, it's the voice of their mother. You know, how could you do that? Or how could you wear that? Or how could you say that? You know, so they're like deciding what to do, and they're hearing their mother yelling at them to do it a certain way. Sometimes the aggressive voice is a certain kind of a moral thing that yells very, very, very loud. Or it could be the aggressive voice is that very selfish voice that always tells me, do what's good for you, do what's good for you, do what's good for you. But there's one side of the two sides is yelling very, very loud and not letting the other side talk. That's an aggressive. We're going to get to it soon, what this looks like. Passive form of intrapersonal conflict resolution. This is very sad. This happens to be one of the saddest ones, I think. It's when there's one voice inside your head, which is telling you the right thing to do, but it's so not confident that it just kind of says, forget it, forget it, forget it. So someone's telling you, you know, that little voice is telling you, you can't really trust him. Don't trust him. And then, but that voice is saying, oh, you're such a baby. You don't really know about people. You don't really know who you can trust. And then you find yourself trusting somebody, and then later you're sorry that you did. And like we always say, hindsight is 20/20. Many times people later will say, I kind of knew I shouldn't have trusted that person. Why? What was the problem? The problem was the voice that said don't trust him was so insecure and so passive, it was just whispering. You know where this is so sad? I see this all the time with mothers who have an intuition about something that's going on with a child. But they keep on saying, oh, what do you know? You don't have any experience. You're just too emotional. You read into everything. This is the passive voice saying, forget it, forget it, forget it, right? Then later, when they find out that the child was really in a bad situation, they say, I knew it 4 years ago. Why didn't you do anything about it then? Because I didn't listen to my voice. The voice was talking and it was saying, forget it, forget it. You don't know what you're talking about. And this is the passive voice. Whenever there's a voice that's talking, but it's saying, oh, you don't really know. That voice is being passive. I like to say in this context that this is why it's so important for us to trust our intuition, or at least to listen to our intuition. Sometimes our intuition is wrong, but when you don't listen to it at all, so often, Chazal tell us, Bina Yitera Nitzna L'Nashim. Women have a good inner sense about things. That's what Chazal are telling you. So when you feel something about somebody, or feel something about a certain situation, that something was off, and then later it comes out that you were right, that was your Bina talking to you. But you, being insecure, being young, said, but everybody else says that this is okay, or other people think that this person's trustworthy. So you kind of go, and you don't listen to your voice. Now, I'm not saying that our inner voices are always right. Some people make mistakes in their intuition. But we're going to see that win-win means, when I get to it, win-win means that you listen to both sides. I'm going to talk about win-win more in a few minutes. But win-win, just for you to understand now, means equal airtime for both sides. If there's a little voice talking to one side, I listen to it at least as much as I listen to the other side. Then I can decide what I want to do, but I listen. If women would listen to their inner voice, they would make much better choices. And I get these phone calls all the time by a woman who sent a child to the school, and the school broke the child. The person who, right before they got engaged, had a very sick feeling about the person who they were engaged to, but they said, what are you talking about? You don't really know. Now, that's a good example. For example, the cold feet that people get sometimes in a relationship, like red flags. Now, I will tell you that statistically, and I've never done statistics, but, people throw this out. Around 90-95% of the time that a person is nervous right before they get engaged, it's just nerves. You're making the biggest decision in your life and you're feeling nervous. But there's that good 5% of people who felt nervous because the person was not a good person. And if you don't listen to the voice and then decide, how am I going to figure this out, then you end up running into a situation. And again, maybe 95% of people say, oh, thank God I didn't break up with him. He was such a great guy. But what about the 5% who later end up in a terrible situation? This is where you have to listen to both voices. And then you need somebody to help you figure out, is there really something wrong with him, or is there not something wrong with him? So this is why we listen. We listen to a voice that's talking. We never ignore a voice that talks inside us. Because often it's that passive little voice that might have something important to say, and I want to listen to it. Okay. Much more to say on that topic. Maybe we'll get back to it soon. What does freeze look like inside my head? Freeze is when I'm thinking, I don't know what I'm going to major in college. I should say, okay, so then I start thinking about it. Maybe I want to go into one of the therapies. Maybe I want to go into engineering. Oh, I don't know. Okay, I have to study for my test. And then it's like 2 months later, should I go into this? Should I go into that? I don't know. I'll study for my test. I'll go out with friends. And these are people who, when I ask them, they come and they talk to me about, I'm not sure what to do next year. And then I'll say, oh yeah, how long I've been thinking about this for a year. But every time it comes up, they kind of think about it a little bit, and then it gets overwhelming for them. And they just kind of they distract themselves in their head, and they don't resolve the issue. We say, al pi Torah, ein simcha k'hatarat hasfekot. That there's nothing as good as happy as resolving a safek, a doubt. People finally know what they're doing next year, feel good. Finally, make a decision, I feel good. Because people don't like to be in a situation of doubt. Except that there's a certain kind of person who I say, kind of a little sarcastically, that for these people, it's ein simcha behatarat hasfekot. They're never happy resolving their conflict. They'd rather stay in an unresolved state. Why? And maybe some of you will recognize yourself in this pattern. Because when you resolve a doubt, you're committed to a certain course of action. Now I have to marry him. Or now I have to go for that major. Or now I have to, I don't know, whatever it is. Some people like to leave their options open. So even though they don't like this, they keep freezing their conflict. Because if they unfreeze it and they make a decision, they're going to be committed. Now I know, I don't like to point reasons as to why, older singles who want to get married, why they're not married. But some of them cry about not being married, and yet the idea of being committed to one guy for the rest of their life is terrifying for them. So they stay in their state of unhappiness and watch their friends go off and build families and have a great life, but to them, it's terrifying to be committed to one person. And this is the freeze, because they keep on not resolving the conflict in their head. When they're going out with a guy, how do they often decide? Wait till he breaks up with me. That's what often happens. Meaning, like, they won't take the responsibility for saying, oh no, he's not for me, because that, or saying he is for me. That's even more scary. So they kind of let the relationship play itself out. And when he breaks up with me, then it's over. That's a freeze. Like, I don't really resolve the conflict in my head. Okay, flee. What does flee look like inside people's head? Flee is when there's a certain conflict that's in my head that's bothering me. I don't know what to do. And it's so hard for me that I end up just distracting myself in my head. Meaning, I could be an obsessive behavior, it could be an addictive behavior, but it could also be something in my head that I'm running to, and I'm thinking a lot about something else in order to not think about the conflict. And these people, again, this is why therapists have to be good therapists. If the person comes into therapy and says, I'm really worried a lot about college. If you're a good therapist, you ask yourself, maybe there's something else that the person is worried about, and they're just like, it's safer for them to worry about college than to worry about the other thing. You have to ask yourself what's going on behind. Not always true, but sometimes true. I have to tell you a very strong example that I had, maybe I said this to you once before, I don't remember, about flee. So I have a advice phone line for the alumni of Michala, and I let other people call also, but it's mostly Michala. Michala started it, so it's mostly for Michala people. And I get all kinds of phone calls, like sometimes about dating issues and sometimes early marriage issues and different kinds of things. But by now, some people who've been my students from Michala already have children who are growing up. So sometimes they call about issues with their kids. So one woman calls me up, and she says to me, it was the saddest thing, she says to me she has a child who's suicidal, who's probably only around 10 years old. And the child is like, keeps going out to the balcony and threatens to jump. And it's so heavy for her that this child is suicidal. She doesn't know what to do, and she doesn't know how to help him, and she's tried different types of things. So it's a very heavy conversation. And I'm thinking about this child. I happen to know who the child was, and I'm imagining this child's face, and I'm imagining how she feels like every time he threatens to kill himself at such a young age. This conversation took place on a Thursday night. So in the middle of the conversation, I usually talk from behind a closed door. I get a knock on the door of my room, and my daughter comes in, and she says, Mommy, I want to make potato kugel for Shabbos. Where are the potatoes? Did I tell the story here? Does that sound familiar? So this woman on the other end has overheard this interaction with my daughter, and she says, potato kugel. And she says, Ms. Schoonmaker, how do you make your potato kugel? Do you like it crunchy? Do you like it this way? Do you put in paprika? I heard this really good idea that you put in this and that. And like, I kind of answered her, and I'm thinking, like, let's go back to the conversation at hand. She wouldn't get off the conversation of potato kugel. For 5 minutes, she's talking to me about this kind of potato kugel and that kind of, did you make it this way? And I said, this is so strange. We're talking about your child who's about to kill himself, and now you're obsessing about potato kugel. And then all of a sudden I realized this was her flee. It was too heavy for her to deal with the conflict that she was dealing with. So she got into this concept, like she just got distracted by potato kugel, and she was allowing herself the escape of talking about potato kugel, because it's much safer to talk about how much pepper do you put in your potato kugel than to talk about a 10-year-old who's jumping off the roof. And as strange as it seemed to me, I said to myself, she needed that. She needed to be able to escape, but that's flee. And sometimes when a conflict is really upsetting us, we run into something else because we need to get away from the thing that we're worried about. Okay, so that's the way it looks intrapersonally. What's the good? What's the resolution that we want? So the resolution that we want is called win-win. Win-win means that both sides get to talk equally, equal airtime for both sides. Now this is true when you're talking about a person, and it's true when you're talking inside your head, intrapersonally. What's the advantage of win-win? It doesn't allow one party to be aggressive, because aggressive people take over the whole conversation. Passive people never speak up. Win-win means I'm talking for 5 minutes now, then you're talking, and the other side has to listen carefully to the first side and to reflect back what they're saying. So that's win-win. And before you even have a solution, it's already much healthier because there isn't like this imbalance. Between people, win-win is very important, especially if you happen to be aggressive by nature or passive by nature. But intrapersonally, it's even more important. Because what happens to us is sometimes a little voice is telling us something, but we're not listening. So for the girl who, for example, doesn't know whether to take the friends with her or to go to her cousins alone for Shabbos, instead of deciding it just by this, like, I'm not even listening to this, I'm just doing it this way, she really listens to herself express both sides of the conflict. Why do you want to take her? What does it mean to you? Why do you not want to take her? I'll give you another example, which I give to married women often. This is like a classic Jewish girls conflict. You get a phone call, you live in Yerushalayim, if you're lucky to live in Yerushalayim, or you live in some other place where there's like a lot of kiruv going on, and you get a phone call, and they tell you that there's a big kiruv Shabbaton, the Shabbos. It could be the Shabbos project, and somebody's asking you to have guests for Shabbos. So it happens to be that you feel sick and you feel that you're getting the flu, and you're planning to just have a really, really easy Shabbos and spend a lot of time sleeping. So the conflict going on in your head is, should I do the mitzvah of Hachnasas Archim, and these people really need me, and I really like having the guests, and I feel I give them a good experience, and then the other side telling you you're getting sick. If you work so hard to have a lot of guests right now, you're going to probably have a really hard week, and then you're going to get really sick, and then your kids are going to suffer. Very often people will make the decision aggressively, meaning just say yes. So what? So what if you're like sick? So, you have to do the mitzvah. When you make a decision based on an aggressive voice talking, or a passive voice that's so little that the other voice wins, you're not really making a balanced decision. Because a balanced decision might be that I might decide to have the company anyway. But if I listen to the voice that told me why I didn't want to have it, I might come up with a more balanced solution. In the first situation, the aggressive mitzvah girl who says, just do it, might collapse and be resentful and be sick. If she says, you really want to do the mitzvah because it's really, really important, but you're feeling a little bit sick and you're afraid that this is going to kind of bring you under. So she might come up with a conclusion like, have the company, but get some help. Have them for one meal, and then you'll be able to sleep for the rest of Shabbos. Cater part of it. Have your sister come over and help you peel vegetables. Say no to them this Shabbos, but book them for next Shabbos. Those are all balanced solutions. I got to do the mitzvah, but I also listened to the fact that I wasn't feeling good. That's the difference. Some people make very extreme decisions because they only listen to one voice in their head. A balanced decision means I listen to the part that didn't like something, and I try to figure out if there's a win-win. Win-win means, is there some way that I can listen to both voices? And in general in life, we have to make balanced decisions. If you're going out with somebody, and you're thinking, should I break up with him, should I not? Should I break up with him, not? And you make a very intense decision, like, just go with him, that's it. Or just break up with him, that's it. You have to listen to the voice. Why do you want to be in this relationship? And why might you want to break up? When you voice both sides, you can come to some realization and some balance. Meaning, maybe I really want to stick with him, but there are a few issues that are bothering me that we have to talk about. Or maybe I have to know that if I marry this person, there are going to be certain weaknesses in the relationship that I'm going to have to compensate for them, but I have to know what they are. Or maybe I really should be breaking up with him because when I air this both sides, there's something really wrong here. But when we don't listen to both sides, the difference between balanced people and people who get themselves into messes is if they resolve conflict in a win-win way intrapersonally. This is very, very important. Okay. Now, I want to give you some other principles of win-win. Let's just see how much time we have. Okay, we have some more time. What are the principles of win-win? So first of all, it's an equal airtime, which is very important, listening to both sides. Now, this is a very important thing in conflict resolution. Often when you have a conflict, it doesn't seem like it could be solved because it's what Susan Heitler says, it's on the level of positions. If you want to go one place for Shabbos and your roommate wants to go somewhere else, you can't be in the Shomron and in Tel Aviv at the same time. That's the level of a position. On a level of position, you can't be in two different places at the same time. And those are the conflicts that seem to not be resolvable. When you move to a level that's called concerns, you move from positions to concerns. Concerns are, why do you want to go to the Shomron for Shabbos? And I'm telling you, why do I want to go here for Shabbos? On the level of concerns, issues can be resolved much more easily. And that's one of the main things of conflict resolution. When you say, why do you want to have the guests for Shabbos? You can't have them and not have them at the same time. But when you say, I want to have them because I really want to mitzvah and I want to be part of this project. I don't want to have them because I'm getting sick. Oh, maybe I could be part of the project without having guests. Maybe I could send over something to help them. Maybe I could write up their schedule really nicely. Meaning, once you look at a concern, I want to be part of this mitzvah, I don't have to do it in a certain way. I want to give you two examples that are, in the story, in the books, they're all like kind of these neat little problems that get wrapped up in a book. But let's look at a conflict that moves from positions to concerns. So, married couple, she wants to go out for dinner tonight. He wants to stay home. On the level of positions, you can't be in a restaurant and at home at the same time. It doesn't work, right? Level of concerns, she says to him, I really want to hear why you want to stay home. And he says to her, I really want to hear why you want to go out. So first of all, they're listening to each other. It's not being resolved aggressively like we're going and that's it. It's not being resolved passively like forget it. It's not being resolved by a freeze like let's just wait till dinner time and we'll just end up having cereal because we didn't decide. It's not being resolved by a flee where they suddenly start fighting about what they're doing for the summer. It's being dealt with, but it's being dealt with win-win. And win-win means that they're both listening to each other. Okay, so interestingly enough, she says, I really want to go out for dinner. Why? Because I feel overworked, and I cook every night, and I'm sick of cooking. This might sound like you in a few years. I'm sick of cooking, and I really just want to eat food that I didn't have to cook, and I don't want to deal with the mess and the cleanup. She says to him, why do you not want to go out to eat tonight? And he says to her, I hate restaurants because I can't stand the noise, and I can't stand the MSG in the food. And sometimes people are smoking, and just like the whole thing makes me sick. Once they're on the level of concerns, it's not restaurant, and this I'm giving you now principle number 3. I'm just going to organize it for you. Principle number 1 is equal airtime for both parties. That's win-win. Principle number 2 is that you move from positions to concerns. Why is this important to you? Not what do you want to do, but why. Principle number 3, both sides go on one list. It's now it's not just that what does Mrs. Cohen want to do for supper and what does Mr. Cohen want to do. It's what is the Cohen family doing for supper. Can I tell you girls that when I first researched this, I'm like, okay, it's cute, put it on one list. Married couples call me back and they tell me that this alone made their conflict so much simpler. Why? Because when you have your list of what you want and somebody has a list of what they want, the conflict is between you and them. This is aggressive. My things, your things. When you put it on one list, it's me and you together against the issue. So the aggression is that the two of us together are fighting the issue. It's not that you are fighting me. And that makes conflict much more pleasant. There's certain people who, every time they get into a conflict, there's a big fight. This way, it's kind of like you're doing a puzzle. It's me and you figuring out how we're going to solve this problem. So conflict can actually bring people close together, even though they don't agree. So one list. What does the one list look like? We need a solution for dinner tonight where she doesn't have to cook. She doesn't have the cleanup. It doesn't have MSG. There's no noise and no smoking. What are the options? Takeout, or he cooks dinner. He cooks dinner. That's in the book. Yes.
That's what we have teenagers for?
Teenagers, right. This is why when you guys come in and you're told, make dinner, right? So in the solution, he cooks dinner. She gets like this night out. He makes it, he sets it up nicely on the porch. He's doing the cleanup, whatever it is. That's called win-win. Because we didn't listen to only one side. We found a solution that made both sides happy. There's an extra benefit in win-win, which is that you get to know the other person better. When you are asking somebody, not what do you want, but why do you want it, you get to understand that people have deep reasons for why they want what they want. I'll give you another example that she brings in her book, where you really get to know the person better. Newly married couple, it's always these couples, but it could be with friends or parents or whatever. So, their first summer vacation, he wants to go to some exotic country where he can climb mountains and do all this interesting stuff. She wants to stay home and read a book in her backyard. On the level of positions, you can't be in an exotic country and in your backyard at the same time, unless you live in an exotic country. It didn't seem like it from this example. So you can't be in two places at one time. So they move to concerns. And concerns are, why? Why do you want to go? So listen to the levels. You can go deeper and deeper in your understanding of somebody. On the most basic level, he says, I work an office job. I sit behind a computer screen the whole time. For me, the idea of going on vacation is to get out there and to climb a mountain and to be physical. He asks her, why do you want to stay home and sit in the backyard? She says, because I'm a nurse and I'm on my feet the whole day running around between the wards. And to me, vacation means just sitting in a beach chair and reading a book. But then, and this is a next principle of conflict resolution, is go deeper. Go deeper means, what are my associations with this thing? Maybe it's not just the fact that he's a nurse and she's a nurse and he's a computer person. Maybe there's something deeper. I can go into my history. I can go into understanding myself better and understanding you better. So he says, I'll tell you the real thing when I think deeper. I grew up in a family with no money. So I've never been to an exotic country ever before. And now that I have a good job and I make some money, it's like a status thing for me that I've earned a different kind of status in life. And now I can afford an airplane ticket and I can go visit some country. She says, well, it's funny that you're saying that because for me it's exactly the opposite. I grew up in a very affluent family and every summer was a visit to a different country. I was always being schlepped to every museum that I didn't want to go to. And all I wanted to do was just sit home and relax and chill. But nobody ever let me. I had to go to every European country in the world. So now that I finally have my own life, I can sit in a backyard with a book and nobody can schlep me off to Italy when I don't want to go. So they're understanding that for them, vacation means something much deeper. It means I finally have my own home. And you're going to find this a lot, girls and married. People have associations. Couples fight about, one woman just said that she and her husband fight about homework. Her husband gets home and says, did you have her do her homework yet? To the little second grader. And she says, no, I want to let her play. He says, no, make her do her homework. She says, no, I don't want to force her. What's the difference? He grew up in a home where nobody ever told him to do anything. And he failed out of high school and didn't get into the college of his dreams. And he will forever associate doing homework and a responsible parent is a parent who doesn't let their kid flunk. She grew up in a very controlling house where everybody was always telling her what to do. And she doesn't want this kid to feel controlled. So it's like a simple thing about having the kid do homework. But for him, homework means success. And for her, homework means controlling. This is so common among your friends. When you and your friends don't agree about something, often it's because you have different associations with the thing at hand. And that's why you're arguing. It's not really only about going here versus going here. It's about for this person, it means something. And for this person, it means something else. And you have a chance to know somebody better. Instead of fighting and just pushing your way or giving in, you have a chance to get to know somebody better. So we have to wind down for today, and we'll wrap this up next week. But I have to tell you a personal conflict that I had and how this shita really helped me. So I lived in Telstone. I don't know if anybody's ever visited Telstone here. It's like a little, kind of like a cute little community around 15 minutes out of Yerushalayim. So I raised my kids there for 17 years. My husband's a Rebbe in Esha Torah. And we get this phone call, it was like right before Shavuot, and the yeshiva wanted us to come to be with the guys in the Old City. Very, very hard to find apartments in the Old City for Shavuot, and we really wanted to be there, but we couldn't find a place to be. So my husband's boss in Esha Torah suddenly says to my husband, David, why don't you move to Jerusalem already? Move to Jerusalem. We'll help you find a place to live. We'll even rent it for you. And that way you'll have an easy time being close to the yeshiva. The guys can come to you Friday nights for meals. Move. Think of moving. Now, he wasn't forcing us, but he was just recommending it and offering us a very nice offer that they would help rent us a nice house so that we could host guys and be close to the yeshiva. I'm like this kind of person. I worked in the places. This is the first place I've ever worked other than Michala for 20-something years. I've been working in Michala. I like having set things in my life. I do my set things. I lived in Tulsa for 17 years. I like set things. I'm not so organized, but I like having set things. So to me, the idea of moving to Jerusalem in no time, 6 weeks, we had to make the decision within 6 weeks because the school year was going to start and we had to whatever. So the idea of moving was like very intimidating to me. My husband's position, this was not an interpersonal conflict. My husband was not saying let's go and I was saying let's not. He, being the good husband that he is, often says to me, whatever you want to do, I'm happy with. I should marry people like that, it's nice. So he says to me, whatever you want to do. And so you're the mother, you're raising the kids, I want you to be happy, you decide if you want to move to Jerusalem or not. And I had this resistance. And so the conflict was intrapersonal in my head. Move, don't move. Move, don't move. And I realized that when I started thinking about it, the positions, listening to the voices, the voice towards moving was, it would be great. Living in Jerusalem was like a big schut. Hosting the Aish Torah guys every Friday night, coming, walking back and forth is such a nice thing. Easier for my husband. 2 of my children weren't doing so well in school where we were. I thought it would be good for them to have a change. That was on all towards the side of moving. Not moving, I had this funny voice inside me that I couldn't listen to so much that was saying privacy, boundaries. When I went deeper, I said, what does privacy mean? And then I realized something very important about myself, and I don't mind, we're all open here, I don't mind sharing. I'm a teacher, and I teach a lot of different groups. I teach in seminaries, I only teach you guys in Michala, but I have a lot of married students who live in a lot of different areas. I've always lived in Telstone, far away from my students, so that when I go to the park and my kid is freaking out on the swing, I don't have anybody saying, oh, let's see how Mrs. Schoonmaker is dealing with her issues. Oh, let's notice if she knows what she's doing or not. I always had privacy. My public life and my private life never merged. So I was calling it privacy. But then I said, go deeper. And I went deeper, and I came up with 2 very interesting things. I said, it's not privacy. In a certain sense, it was a certain lack of maturity. I said, you know what? You're an adult already. And if your child is freaking out in the supermarket, and people say, oh, Mrs. Schoonmaker's child is freaking out in the supermarket, so what? And I realized that I had become so dependent on my privacy that I wasn't comfortable being in a public setting, merging my private and public life. And I said, you're calling it privacy, but it's not privacy. It's perfectionism, it's ego, it's something which is not a good thing for you. That was one awareness that I had that was important. Number 2, and you'll find this interesting, history. Because when you go deeper into your psyche, but you also go deeper into your history. My father started OJ, or Yerushalayim. When he started Yerushalayim when I was a little girl, yeshiva was like in its beginning stages, and whenever there was a problem in the yeshiva, like a leak in the building, the guys would it was all like dealt with as like a new school. So there were a bunch of times that I would wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and there'd be like 50 guys lying on the floor in my living room because there was like a leak in the building. So they all just came over, or like a flight once came in too early and the dorms weren't ready. So me and my sister were like flipping pancakes for like 70 guys who like showed up from the airport for breakfast. I guess, I never realized this before, but I guess as being a girl and kind of walking up to go to the bathroom at 3 o'clock in the morning and finding guys all over your house, to me the association of living near a yeshiva was, I'm not going to have a life anymore. They're going to inundate me at 3 o'clock in the morning and I'm not going to have the space. When I became honest with myself and I looked at that, I said, you know what? This is completely different. Aish Torah has been around for many, many years. You're not going to live on top of the yeshiva, but you're also not the go-to place in case there's a leak in the building. And you're not going to have 50 guys suddenly sleeping on your floor in the middle of the night. So because I was honest with myself about that voice that was saying privacy, boundaries, but I didn't know where it was coming from, because I gave it airtime, because I was doing win-win, I realized that the things that were pushing me against moving to Yerushalayim were not coming from a mature place, and they were not real issues. But if I wouldn't have listened to it, either I would have not moved, or I would have moved and been resentful. But because I listened to it, I said, oh, okay, and you know what? I even made a win-win decision. I live in Givada Miftar, I live next to Mrs. Lechman, and I'm not living around all my students. I meet them in the supermarket. I don't meet them every time I open my front door. But I had to listen to my voice to understand, you know what? You need to ease yourself into public-private life. Don't live in the middle of Ramat Eshkol where you're going to open your door and all your students are going to ask you for advice the next second. Live somewhere a few blocks away where you'll meet and interact, but you'll still have some privacy. But this is win-win. And I mean, the nice end of the story is that we moved to Jerusalem, and I'm super happy and very, very happy that we did it. But this is an example of when you try to do win-win in your conflict resolution, you get to deeper understandings of yourself. You listen to the voices that are making sense, the voices that aren't making sense, and you come to a healthier decision. Okay, next week we'll wrap up this topic. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too.